renaming columns. So I think we've had enough of those simple select statements. I think you're all professionals by now in selecting all of the data and figuring out like the most simple select statements and just filtering out certain columns and rows and all that goodness. And I think you're all very competent in that area. But now we're going to get into something a little more fun. We're going to teach you something new. Renaming columns. So what does that mean? Well, over here you can see customer ID, first name. Well, what if we wanted to rename that to first name, uppercase F, uppercase N? Well, then we would want to rename some columns, right? We want to present the data in a nicer way. Let's say your manager comes up to you and he's like, hey, can I get a subset of data from this table and can you make sure that it looks pretty? Well, then you may want to go in and rename some columns, make them look a little nicer. You don't want to give your manager like just a raw spreadsheet. You want to make it look a little nicer. You want to give it a little pizzazz. So how would we go about that? Well, when renaming columns, it's a very simple statement. It's select column as, and then between string quotes, you give it a new name. And so you can fill in anything there, and the column will be named that. Isn't that cool? So let's get into that. Let's do an exercise around that. So here we are in Valentina Studio. Let's get to renaming some columns. Let's make this data look cool. All right, so here we go. Select star from. Let's go with employees. That's where we want to like revamp some of the data. So over here we can see employee number, birth date, first name, last name, gender, and hire date. So let's take the first three and let's make them look a little nicer. So let's take employee number. And let's rename that. Well, okay, looks like I selected everything here by auto-selecting. But all I wanted was employee number. And we want to do that as employee number. All right, let's see how that works. There we go, employee number. Looking nicer already. Then we had birth date. So let's do that as birthday. That's a nicer way of saying it. Less formal. And also let's take first name. Whoop, first name. And let's do that as first name. All right, what's this gonna look like? Boom, there we go. Easy peasy. And just like that, we have an easier way of naming columns. We can format columns. It makes it so much nicer to visualize data when you can give the columns the proper names. If you need to generate kind of like an overview or whatnot, if you needed to export this, or if you just wanted to look at it in a nicer way and you needed to select a subset, it's nicer to give columns an easier name to read. So there we go. That's renaming columns. And feel free to go through any of the other tables and do a global select, look at the data, figure out if you want to rename some, play around with it a little.